2001 saw the release of the Oscar-winning animated movie Shrek, followed shortly after by its slightly less award-winning sequel, Shrek 2. With it came a massive shift in children's media, and lots of companies trying to take that self-aware style and make it their own. A few famously terrible examples are the two Happily Never After movies and the Unstable Fables trilogy. The most famous is definitely the Disney movie Enchanted. Now, it's important to set the stage before we go in. Shrek didn't just create a trend, it changed media as a whole. People still talk about Shrek now, and the last Shrek movie came out in 2010. A sequel to a spin-off of Shrek 4 got nominated for Best Animated Picture and destroyed the box office 11 years after the movie it was a sequel to. All of this just adds up to make Shrek the most culturally important thing to happen in 2001. But this isn't a video about Shrek. This is a video about Hoodwinked. The movie starts, as any other great media does, by setting the scene. Immediately, we are greeted with arguably the most famous scene of the movie, and in my opinion, it's also hilarious. This is genuinely one of my favorite movie openings of all time, because it so perfectly takes everything that you know and expect from popular culture and builds off of those expectations. It starts with a storybook, and then directly into the classic story of Red Riding Hood. But if you
think you know the story,
who are you?
Think again.
I'm sorry, I couldn't resist. It's just such a great trailer. Okay, let's get back to it. The movie takes Red Riding Hood and immediately twists it. After all, it's like they always say,
can't judge a book by its cover. If you want to know the truth, you've got to flip through the pages.
I got you again! Oh, that was so good. Oh god, I'm so funny. Just all the time. Oh god, more people should compliment me. Anyway, it starts as Red Riding Hood normally does. A young girl walks into her grandmother's house.
What big hands you have. And what big ears you have. What big eyes you have.
Are we just gonna sit around here and talk about how big I'm getting?
And that's where things take a turn. Taking the train not just off the rails, but off the nearest cliff. Now I'm actually going to pause here. I'm just going to say right now that I highly recommend this movie. If you have not seen it and you do plan to watch it or find it interesting at all, I'd find a copy and watch it now. This video will be here when you get back, no worries. Everyone else can keep watching though. There's something worth noticing right away in this first scene. While there are goofs or gags to keep things interesting, it's definitely not the main attraction of the scene. Pretty much every joke that's there is just straight out of the script from Red Riding Hood.
Ah, Granny, what bad breath you have.
And honestly, the fact that they fit the characters so well too makes them funnier than they have any right to be. But the focus definitely isn't on them. It's on the characters. Which is how the whole movie is, actually. That's because, unlike Shrek, Hoodwinked isn't really a comedy. It's a mystery. Hoodwinked as a narrative is constantly building towards two different and seemingly unrelated mysteries. The first mystery is extremely straightforward. What happened during the intro?
Alright, what do we got?
It's a domestic disturbance. Breaking and entering, wielding an axe without a license, intent to eat.
Not everybody is cool with that explanation though. Let me introduce you to Nikki Flippers.
Say, Tommy, you lose some weight?
No, didn't think so.
And this is how we get to the main crux of our story. Flippers reconstructing the day bit by bit through the medium of interviewing someone within clear earshot of the person they are accusing.
For a reporter, you sure have a strange way of doing your job.
What can I say? I was raised by wolves.
First up, we have Little Red, who's known for
This red hood I wear,
What about when you're not wearing it?
I usually wear it.
Next is the Wolf, or so he says.
You got me. I'm a poodle.
Then we have the woodsman. And lastly, Granny Puckett herself. We'll get back to her later. All 4 of our main characters are given time in the spotlight, each one giving their own perspective on the events that led to Granny Puckett's house that day. This is also how our second mystery is revealed. Throughout each of their stories, they all have an interaction with a thief, known as the Goody Bandit, who has been stealing recipes from bakeries and goodie shops in order to force them out of business. Before we go on, I actually found Uncle Dane on Cameo, and so I sent him like $20 and asked him to do the Hoodwinked challenge, which is literally just watching the movie and then telling me what his review was. So this is what he sent back to me a few days later. I haven't actually watched this yet, so we're experiencing it together for the first time. It's gonna be great.
Yo, what's up? I'm Uncle Dane, and this is my attempt at the challenge. Rock on. What's the Scooby-Doo? We're coming after you. We're gonna solve that mystery. I see you, Scooby-Doo. The challenge back to you. What's the Scooby-Doo? What's the Scooby-Doo? We're gonna follow you. We're gonna solve that mystery. We see you, Scooby-Doo. We're coming after you. What's the Scooby-Doo?
In 1950, the movie Rashomon hit Japan like an atom bomb. It was one of the top-earning films of the year and became the director's first international hit film. It has since ranked as one of the best movies of all time in multiple polls, and even spawned the Rashomon effect. According to the internet's top source, the Rashomon effect is a storytelling and writing method in cinema in which an event is given contradictory interpretations or descriptions by the individuals involved, thereby providing different perspectives and point of views of the same incident. In the movie Rashomon, and most uses of the effect it spawned, there comes an aspect of unreliable narrator, where you can't actually be certain that the person telling the story is telling the truth. That's not what happens here. Everyone here is telling the truth, and they are telling everything factually. I actually find it incredibly interesting the things that people choose to mention, or the things that they completely omit. With all of that in mind, we have another topic to discuss. You might have heard the term postmodernism as the bad guy in some old man speeches online, but I think it's generally pretty important to understand, at least to some level, when discussing Hoodwinked. So I'm going to explain it briefly in this video right now. I'm going to do it right now. Postmodernism, in the simplest possible terms that I can put it, is the idea that truth is based on perspective. Not exactly based on it, but like it revolves around perspective. It can change. A super easy example, not exactly the best one, but like an easy one to get you a general idea. When you're first in science and you're in the early classes, you learn about the states of matter. There's solid, liquid, and gas. And as a kid, you're growing up, you took this class, and to you it is 100% true that there are 3 states of matter. Then you move on to slightly further in physics, and you learn about the 4th state of matter, plasma. In which case, there's 100% true there's that. If you go to the Wikipedia page for states of matter, it is horrifying. There's so many. This next part, I'm just going to edit out of the video entirely. Truth also changes based on who is telling the story and their own interpretation. There's a now classic meme that shows 2 people standing on either side of a symbol in the middle. For one of them, that symbol is the number 9, and for the other, the number is 6. Which of them is wrong? Neither, right? It is a 9, and it is a 6. Both of those are true based on where that truth is coming from. Which is somewhat a problem with modernism, which is a philosophy around finding the absolute truth in life that postmodernism attempts to solve. Because if you go into a fully modernist way of looking at things, generally you're going to end up with the one being right being the person with either the loudest microphone or the most money. Now, that is all extremely brief and trimmed down, but we'll come back to it later in the video, I promise. Either way, Rashomon and Hoodwinked are postmodern works of art, and they both seek to explore those ideas. In a situation with multiple, often competing viewpoints, what is truth? To showcase this, I'm going to recount a small moment from the movie that I find interesting, and I'm going to do it from 3 different perspectives: Little Red, the Wolf, and the Woodsman. Let's start this event with Little Red. A small child stands up in the middle of a forest after having just fallen out of a cable car. She looks up and immediately a bright flash of light hits her eyes from something that also just fell down. When she turns around, she sees a grown adult wolf there, towering over her. The wolf begins asking questions about her and her family, slowly attempting to get at the recipes in her basket that she's been trying to protect. Suddenly, the wolf roars at her, and she runs away. Wolf W. Wolf is in the middle of an investigation when his lead suspect falls from a cable car and lands right in front of him. His assistant, Twitchy, also falls from the tree, and as a result an accidental picture is taken. He tries to play it off like he doesn't know who she is, but he still tries to ask questions and further his investigation. Meanwhile, Twitchy is attempting to fix his camera after the fall. While fixing the camera, Wolf's tail gets caught in its gears, causing him to scream in pain and Red to run away. Kirk spent the whole time chopping down the forest. He had no idea any of it was happening. This scene is a fantastic example of interpretation changing what is actually happening. From Red's point of view, a predator is standing over her in the middle of a forest, asking her a bunch of stuff you shouldn't tell strangers. She's evading questions, but she's trying to be polite while not actually engaging with him. From Wolf's point of view, she is a criminal who's avoiding questions because she has something to hide. Now for the best part, the roar. Oh, sorry, I mean the scream. No, I mean, from Red's account, Wolf roared angrily at her. Wolf, however, claims that he screamed in pain. Even as you're watching the movie, the scream itself changes. How you interpret the events changes what those events are. Kirk still had nothing to do with it, and he's never really had a single thought in his life. I don't know why you brought him up in the first place. These interpretations from each character actually tell us more and more about them. My personal favorite example is just a tiny bit further in the day. Red is running away from Wolf until Wolf eventually catches up. She promptly pepper sprays him and runs away. From her point of view, at least. If we look from the wolf's perspective, you see a completely different side of Red. She, and this is true, kicks the shit out of him. This difference between the two stories comes down to 2 main aspects: the way each of them told the story, and the way everyone else heard the story. There are indications throughout the movie that show that the view we are seeing is not the exact perspective of the events from the character. This is how Nikki Flippers is interpreting it. The most blatant example is at the end of Red's story, when she has to explain multiple times the order of when things happen. As she does this, the visuals and how characters act actually change on the fly to reflect it. There are 2 options here that cause such a massive disparity in the depictions of this moment. Either Red didn't feel the need to mention it, or Nikki didn't even consider it. We don't get her exact words, unfortunately, but the way it's shown is just spraying him and running away. Did she say that's all she did? Did she use the words pepper spray him and run away? Or did she say she was able to fend him off, and that's the only way that Nikki thought she was capable of? If we flip that around a bit, Wolf got a really bad beatdown. Is that because the beatdown was actually that bad? You see, this is one of 3 different things it could be. 1, that's entirely accurate to what happened. 2, Wolf embellishing it to help prove his point that Red is the bandit. Or 3, Nikki adding extra emphasis to it because it's either funny to him or it stuck out. There's no way for us to know for sure. The music in Hoodwinked is really good, which is a bit expected given the talent behind it. Most notable is Ben Folds, but the entire music department did a fantastic job. It's all original music instead of having a jukebox soundtrack like a lot of more recent big movies. Now, the jukebox style of taking popular music and incorporating it can work extremely well. Like Guardians of the Galaxy, that's a good example of a jukebox style thing done correctly. An example of it being done wrong is the movie Suicide Squad, but I'm like 90% sure that's a government psyop, like Taylor Swift or vegetables. So we're not gonna talk about that. Honestly though, while I have a lot of thoughts on the music, I wouldn't be able to do it any better than a comment left on a previous video. On the video, TF2's worst movement mechanics, the user Johannes Gutenberg left an amazing write-up, and I'm just going to read it to you right now. Many critics ask themselves, what separates a good song from a great one? I'm here today to tell you what category Tree Critters from the movie Hoodwinked falls into, but first we must fully understand it. The song introduces deep and convoluted metaphors that are hard to catch on your first listen. One of the most important lines in the song is, "You can take the critter out of the tree, but you can't take the tree out of the tree critter's needs." This long and convoluted metaphor signifies that the song has a deeper meaning, a purpose. In that line, the tree critters are meant to represent oppressed people, and the tree is supposed to represent society. You are able to take out and cast away those oppressed people from society, but in doing so, you are pushing them away and making them feel more cast out. This song explores the means of people too afraid to show themselves to others in fear that they will be cast out by those who don't share those same views. Starting with the semi-heavy metal rock at the beginning, transitioning to a mellow, soothing portion, and then back to the semi-heavy metal, ties directly into that previous theme. The middle mellow portion is supposed to represent when these disclosed people are cut off from contact with the outside world. But the truth is, the beginning and end are a symbol of what society actually is when people are removed from outside contact. The minority keep the social system woven together and balanced, so that the pyramid doesn't collapse in on itself. I'm a firm believer that Tree Critters is meant to show that everybody has a place in this world, and that when everyone is brought together, then, and only then, will we have peace with each other. All in all, a song that dives deep into these deep and difficult themes must be classified as not only a great, but a fantastic song. This song alone makes watching this true cinematic classic worth it. Thank you for your attention, and I hope you find the song and movie just as enthralling as I did. Just as a warning, I'm going to lose people here, and I know that. I find the art of storytelling immensely interesting in how much it tells you about the people who created it. Children's media especially, since they're often taking very large concepts and breaking them down into small, easily understood chunks for children to be able to follow along. However, a large amount of people believe that it isn't worth digging into this media, or simply don't want to talk about the topics I'm about to talk about. So, I guess trigger warning for these topics. This video has chapters, so if you want to skip this, you can go ahead directly to the chapter labeled Hoodwinked 2. Once it's finally revealed that Boingo is the bandit, he gets an entire song dedicated to his evil plan and every aspect of it. He even brings out a slideshow to show every single step. So let's look at that plan for a bit. Step 1. Steal recipes from small businesses, which causes the businesses to shut down. Step 2. Make your product so addictive that people don't want to stop buying it. And step 3. Build one big business in their place. In the business world, there's a term known as a killer acquisition. This is the act of buying a competitor simply to shut them down and remove them from the equation. In the March 2021 edition of the Journal of Political Economy, they published a paper titled Killer Acquisitions, and it breaks down the practice within the pharmaceutical industry.
Using pharmaceutical industry data, we show that acquired drug projects are less likely to be developed when they overlap with the acquirer's existing product portfolio, especially when the acquirer's market power is large because of weak competition or distant patent expiration. Conservative estimates indicate that 5.3% to 7.4% of acquisitions in our sample are killer acquisitions. These acquisitions disproportionately occur just below thresholds for antitrust scrutiny.
Even if you aren't talking about buying them or stealing their recipes, Big businesses tend to shut down local competition extremely easily. Walmart especially has been shown to suck small towns dry whenever they decide to set up.
A 44-year-old grocery store in North Carolina saw a 30% sales drop immediately when a nearby Walmart opened a couple of years ago. Whenever the mom and pop supermarket cut prices, the Walmart would match or undercut them. The store finally succumbed to the inevitable last October, closing up entirely.
There are quite a lot of people that would advocate for pure, unregulated capitalism, and might even use this as a positive example. After all, when you look at the face of it, the competition showing up did make the local shop cut prices. However, cutting prices didn't help the local store. Walmart can just match them and handle the profit loss, while the local store simply cannot afford to. And of course, as soon as that local store is gone, Walmart can raise its prices right back up to where they were before, or even higher. That isn't healthy competition. That's drowning your opponent and letting the local population watch. As for the last step, you don't even need to look outside of the realm of this channel to find examples. Video games have been flooded with gambling mechanics and loot boxes for years now. Gaming has progressively become closer and closer to a casino every year with no signs of slowing down, despite some mild regulation. Social media, including YouTube, is also designed to keep you hooked as long as possible. Just look at one of the largest creators on the platform, Mr. Beast. His editing style is entirely designed to maximize every sense you have, and he's taken over the entire platform. If you have control over what people are addicted to, addiction is extremely profitable. The only thing that Boingo is doing wrong here is the stealing. If he would have just skipped the stealing part, he could have done the entire rest of the plan easily, and nobody could have stopped him. Remember earlier when I was talking about how what we're seeing could be either the storyteller or the listener's fault with each misinterpretation? There's a similar argument that could be made about the roar example that I'd used in the chapter right before it. Did Red describe it as a roar, or did the police, who have already put Wolf into a muzzle, just decide that of course the wolf is violent? All wolves are violent. That may feel like a bit of a stretch, but let's talk about the police in Hoodwinked. Repeatedly, we are shown the police jumping to conclusions with no investigative work, eating evidence, falling asleep on the job, wrongfully arresting random people, and literally putting a man into a muzzle. That list doesn't even include the shit that Nikki Flippers specifically does. Actually, screw this. We'll come back to the muzzle. First, we have to talk about Nikki Flippers is a racist. Despite the movie constantly trying to prop him up as a good guy, he still repeatedly does racist behavior. The easiest one to point out is his constant racist jokes towards his fellow policemen. But that isn't just him making those. In Hoodwinked 2017, a high school level remake of the entire movie scene for scene, characters even point out some of the blatant racism happening because it's so bad.
That's racist!
Unfortunately, not enough. But that's beside the point. We'll loop back to that further in the video. Let's talk about the dynamics of animal movies real quick. There are generally two forms of animal movies. One where the animal aspects are extremely important to the character, like Zootopia, or the ones where the animal aspects are purely stylistic and they don't really mean anything, like Robin Hood. In the former, the animal parts are formative to their identity and matter a lot to the characters and the story. In the latter, the animal aspects are almost entirely just for the audience. If they were people, the story wouldn't change at all. Hoodwinked tries to do a bit of both, but I definitely argue that it falls into the former. The identities of each character and how people see them because of it matters to the story. Let's be real. Would Boingo have gotten as far as he did if he weren't a cute little bunny rabbit? If Wolf was the bandit, would he have been able to get this far without being suspected? Then there's Nikki Flippers, who is a frog cop that makes racist jokes about literally every single one of his coworkers. He tells the bear that he woke up on the wrong side of the cave. He comments rudely about a pig's weight. Now that we know that the animal characteristics are real and matter to the story, those racist jokes seem to change a bit, don't they? He's just making jokes about things they can't change about themselves. Haha, pig fat. Thanks, Nikki, for that lovely insight. And most notably, not even on the joke side, you know, like Pluto in the Mickey Mouse universe, there's Goofy, he's a dog, he can talk, and then there's Pluto, who's just a fucking dog. Nikki Flippers has a pet dog. He's a guy on a leash, and he does work for him. He takes notes during the investigation. He is keeping a slave. This movie is propping up a slave owner. I didn't notice this as a kid, but that's fucked up. That's fuck that guy. Let's talk about the muzzle. They put a muzzle on him because they just kind of guessed that he was trying to eat red with no evidence, when this entire time he was offering to share his side of the story and they just shut him down and put a muzzle on him anyway. Why don't they do anything to better detain Kirk? He's big enough that he probably doesn't even need a weapon to take them all out. They even put a taser to him because he has the audacity to ask for a phone call after being arrested. To add to all of that, in a weird parallel to modern America, the police even get weirdly excited about putting a child into a cage.
What's with the handcuffs on a little girl? Her wrists can slip right out. How about a cage?
Bring in the cage!
I was being sarcastic.
Sarcasm, strike the cage.
Good job, guys. Hoodwinked, as a movie, does not like the police, despite all of its efforts to say otherwise. I mean, they literally have some of their police being actual pigs. None of this commentary is saying that the film is bad. In fact, I would argue the complete opposite. This movie is a great example of subtext in its story, and drawing from the real world in order to make the fictional one feel even more real. In Hoodwinked, the police are incredibly incompetent and tend to make snap judgments that ultimately harm people. The world they live in also has a capitalist structure that promotes monopolies and addictions. Feels relatable, right? Okay, let's go back to the silly stuff. Unfortunately, despite the tease at the end of the movie, Hoodwinked never got a sequel. So I decided to make a plot for my own theoretical sequel. This idea was originally posted over on Lemmy in a community I moderate called Granny Puckett's House. I think it would be a good story to show a more coming-of-age side to Red. In the original, she is still just a delivery girl at the end of the movie, despite the many changes to her character throughout the film. Granny Puckett could be growing too old to do extreme sports and realizes she needs Red to carry on the family business. Despite her heritage, Reg is mostly just the extreme sports side of her grandmother, and struggles to contain herself long enough to be able to do something as gentle and precise as baking. Meanwhile, Wolf and Twitchy are chasing a new story. The trees are vanishing. This leads them down an increasingly dangerous rabbit hole, and eventually, to the happy yodelers. The twist at the end of the movie is that Kirk was faking his personality this whole time, and he's actually a mastermind that's testing the forest creatures so he can chop it down and start a logging business. The acting role in the first film was just an excuse to be able to act like a woodsman. Even without the callback, he planned on continuing to pretend to be a woodsman under the guise of future acting work. Now, that's just my own interpretation of things, but I'm definitely not the first person to ever bother taking a spin on hoodwinked storytelling. Hoodwinked 2017 is a High School Musical remake of all of Hoodwinked, scene for scene. It has the budget of cardboard and some construction paper, and it is beautiful. They take some mild liberties with the character dialogue.
That's racist!
Most likely due to simply forgetting the line and improvising the general idea, but the entire story is fully intact.
Are we just gonna sit around here and talk about how big I'm getting?
I do admit though that it's a hard watch, especially if you haven't seen the movie, since it's going to be a lot harder to tell exactly what's going on. Either way though, the movie was removed from YouTube, so I can't link it. But I do have a copy saved, so I can show you some of the highlights.
Come out to the woods, have a few laughs. I was supposed to be hibernating. Oh no, Mr. Ghost? Mr. Ghost! and the trail ends here.
The trail of breadcrumbs. Be prepared, this lesson must be shared. This lesson must be shared, be prepared. Ah!
No, not yet. I was making deliveries for my granny's goodie shop. Here's a story I... That's racist!
We've talked a lot about stereotypes and the ways that people in the world of Hoodwinked use and play around with those stereotypes. So let's talk about Keith, a prime example of not caring about what others say and sticking to your own guns.
Dolph, tie up the brat. Lisa, hold the book. Vincent, get the truck. And Keith, darn it, change your name, please. That's not scary, and I'm embarrassed to say it. Boris, try that. Keith, you know? Oh, watch out for Keith.
And there we go. That's pretty much it, to be honest. There's not a lot to go on there. He has like, I don't think he has a single acting line. I don't think he says a single thing. Good job, Keith. You did it. Okay, so I've put off this section long enough. The animation is bad. Just straight up objectively bad. Hoodwinked was one of the first ever fully 3D animated indie films ever. And the director stated in an interview that the entire movie's budget was only about $8 million. For comparison, the movie Chicken Little came out that same year and had a budget of $150 million. And that movie is Chicken Little. Chicken Little. Admittedly though, when watching the film now, you have to realize that we're all a bit spoiled with modern luxuries. 3D animation tools are so extremely easy to get now. Blender did exist back in 2005, but it's not even close to what it's capable of now. Even the Blender Open movies that they make every year completely blow the animation from Hoodwinked out of the water. Hoodwinked is very much a movie that should have been given more than it was. I would absolutely love if somebody took the exact same audio and just reanimated the whole thing start to finish. It would be a fantastic film when they remove its biggest flaw. There's honestly not a ton to really say about the animation though. It's a super memed on thing when talking about this movie, so I can't really add to that conversation. So far, we've touched on a lot of topics throughout the movie, not only breaking down the story and how it's told, but delving into the characters and the problems within the universe and so on and so forth. But you may be asking, what does this have to do with competitive Team Fortress 2?